Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are coming from. Join my Built to Acquire Bootcamp, how to buy a property management company in 2026 and reach your growth goals. I would love if you put in the chat where you're coming from and your name. So a few housekeeping rules that I like to go over is we're going to be together for about an hour. I recommend if you're anything like me, try and close your other browsers, put your phone upside down so you're not distracted. We have some really good information we're going to share today. Feel free to use the chat. Post questions as I am talking. I will do my best to answer all of them. So I love some Q&A at the end. Use the chat for sure. It makes it a lot more interactive for me. We'll go ahead and get started. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Stacey Salyer, the acquisition expert in third-party property management. And my nickname is the Slayer. So now that you have joined my boot camp, we are friends. So you can call me the Slayer when you see me in person. And today we're going to talk about buying a property management company in 2026 and how to reach your growth goals by purchasing instead of being on the hamster wheel. I'm actually in a different location today because I am in Washington State. And if you have been watching the news, we have had some insane weather. So I have no power, internet, or water at my house. So I had to quickly move locations today. But that's what property management's all about, pivoting and troubleshooting. Today, we are going to go through the 90-day roadmap. At the end, you're going to have the clarity of what it looks like to purchase a property management company. And you're going to have the confidence after we go through everything. At the end, of course, you're going to have a 90-day roadmap that you can then go out into your market and move forward to purchase what you're looking for. So let's start at the beginning. When we talk about acquisitions is definitely a very sexy subject in property management. Everybody's like, oh, I want to buy a company. What I hear a lot about is what's the company worth? How much money does it cost? But there's so many steps from start to finish and what I call the messy middle. So we're going to start with first conversation. Now, first conversation can't even really start until you determine your actual market. You got to look at your current business and think, okay, if I'm here in this town, how far out do I want to go? How is my current business set up? Can I move to a different county, multi-market, multi-state? What would that look like? You've got to determine your market, right? Your locations. Once you determine that, go through those markets and make a list of everybody doing property management. That's from big companies to maybe just small realtors, anyone and everyone. There's different ways to find that. Of course, Google is one of the easiest ways, but you want to make that list. I recommend then utilizing a CRM. So actually putting all that data into a CRM so that you can have easy access to it and you're not just having pieces of paper flying around your office. So now that you have your list, right, you've determined your market, where you want to build, and who you're going to contact, you need to work on that first conversation. That first conversation could be anywhere. It could be like phone call, it could be in person. And I don't recommend doing cold calls in a cold way, but building relationships. Back when I was doing acquisitions on a national level, I did a lot of cold calling. I did a lot of what I called recon work. I used LinkedIn. I would do a lot of searches and I would get to know kind of who I was calling. So when I was cold calling, I was calling with a purpose. I knew a little bit about them, their market, their business. Maybe they were a member of a local organization and I could relate a meeting that we had been to together. So that's what I recommend, is starting to build those relationships. Personally, I'm not a fan of like, hey, this is Stacey. Are you going to sell your business? Or do you want to sell your business? But more, again, building that relationship and that rapport. And then taking notes. It's really important when you start that conversation that you stop talking and you listen to what they're saying. What are they saying? So let's say you're talking with them and they're like, yeah, I am looking at retiring in the next year. Oh, well, tell me more about that. What's your plan? What's your time frame? Then you kind of start asking those questions like, do they have a team? Do they have an office? You're kind of getting that intel. If you're on the phone, you can take notes in your CRM. If you're in person, try and remember the conversations. You can take your notes later, but you're really working hard to get that intel so you can then follow up. So I call this like the first, second, third dates, right? When you're first dating, you don't go from first conversation to marriage. You want to do first, second, third date. And let's say all these conversations are going really well. They're like, yes, I do want to retire in the next 6 months. I would be interested in moving forward with you. I like to call the due diligence the promise ring phase. I talked about this on one of my boot camps on how we do dating, and then we move to promise ring. So before you jump to due diligence, though, there's a few steps that are really important. One, you want to make sure that you're signing an NDA. This is very important for the seller, but it's important for the buyer as well. So you want to be doing an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So that way you as the buyer, you're not going to go out and share all the information that you learn. The seller shouldn't want all of their information spread around the community. Once you start with the NDA, then you start digging into all the information. So at this point, then it's really important, and go ahead and take notes. These are some of the highlights of the things that you want to get. You want to make sure that you're getting all the financials. So go back a minimum of 2 years. You want to get tax returns. Again, minimum of 2 years. You want to make sure that you're getting all the banking information. Most states require a rent trust account, a security deposit trust account, and then a business operations account. You want to make sure that you're going back a couple of years with that. Make sure that you're getting access to their property management software system. Hopefully, they're using a modern property management software system like Appfolio, Buildium, or Rentvine. If they're not, however they're reconciling money in, money out, you want to get access to that with all the whole picture. You want to get a minimum, again, of the current lease agreement, the property management agreement, any documents that they use all the time. This is a great time as well to start looking at their Google reviews and Yelp reviews. Take a look at how they have their team structured. Are they 1099 contractors? Are they employees? How are they paid? So you really want to dig in to everything that they're doing in their business. And then once you have all that, you need your P&Ls, balance sheets, all that good stuff. So once you have all that, it's going to be a massive amount of paperwork. But this is really important for you as a buyer, that you are looking under the hood and you are turning over all the rocks and you're looking under them and you're asking all the different questions. Because if you're not, you could miss something. Now, most sellers are going to work with you as the buyer, but it is up to you as the buyer to make sure that you're asking the right questions. Once you're looking at all the financials, this is a great opportunity to sit down with the seller and say, okay, let's go through this line by line. Tell me more. What's your salary that you're drawing? Because you may not be taking the seller with you. They may not be an employee with you. That, of course, is negotiable. You're going to look at what they're paying in payroll. Are you going to be taking all the employees with you or not? This is a really important conversation to have. Some sellers will assume that the buyer is going to be taking their employees, but sometimes the buyer doesn't intend to take the employees. So if you're not having that communication during this promise ring phase, the engagement phase and the closing phase could make it really uncomfortable. So you really want to go through that P&L. And then you want to take out anything that isn't related to what's going to cost you to run the business. All of us do this with our businesses, right? Like we may run vehicle notes through our company or employ a minor child in our house for tax write-off, but they still do a little bit of work. That salary isn't going with the purchase. So it's really important that you're digging in and you're going through it line by line by line, because that is going to affect what you end up offering on the final price. So you have the money piece of it. Then you have the banking piece. Are they doing monthly reconciliations? When was their last audit from the Department of Real Estate? Do they have audits for the Department of Real Estate? In my state, it's common. Every 3 years, everyone has one. So I would want to know, what was your last audit look like? What did that look like? Did you pass it? And then you really want to look at their lease. So you're looking at, is their lease compliant? How many of the tenants are on the current lease agreement? Is it following landlord-tenant law? Are there additional fees in that lease that you can also attribute to what's on the balance sheet and in the property management software system? Is there opportunity for you there? As a buyer, it's really important that you know your current business. So if you already have a property management company and you're going to buy another one, hopefully you know your dollar revenue per door, because if you're able to look at another company to purchase, and let's say your revenue per door is $200 a month, and the one you're looking at is only $100 a month, you can see where you could definitely make that up, right? So depending on what their lease looks like, their management agreement looks like, and what yours looks like. So that's, that number piece of it you really want to take a look at. And then the management agreement itself. This is a big one. I know we talk a lot about it in the industry, but is it assignable? So if it's not assignable, is that going to be working with your plan of how you plan on purchasing it, or your plan of assimilating it into your business? This is also the perfect time to have the conversation with the seller. How do they see themselves transitioning everything to you? Again, there is no bad question or conversation. The only bad conversation or question that you can have during a purchase is the one that you're not having. So tell me, seller, what is your expectation for transition? Because they may be thinking like, okay, well, we close on May 1st and May 2nd, I am on a plane to another country and I am done. I am never taking a call again. I threw my phone in the trash can as I was getting on the plane. I don't know. It really depends. But if you, as the buyer, if you're not having that conversation, you may assume like, oh, well, this particular seller, they're going to help me run it or transition clients over, but you don't set that up ahead of time, then that's going to make it really tough. So have those conversations. There's nothing off limits. I can't stress enough the employee piece of it as well. I have seen deals blow up where, the seller assumed their key employee would be going with the buyer, but the buyer's, why would I do that? I already have a full staff. So have those conversations ahead of time. With the due diligence period, if you as the buyer are planning on taking any employees, it's really important that you're looking at how the current company is ran. What is their company culture like? Do they have processes? How are they running them? I mean, every company has processes, but are they actually documented? Are they using process software? Are the employees to the point where it's going to take you several months to get them up to your level for training? Are they willing and capable of that? There's a lot to look at. And you don't want to just say, oh, yeah, I'll just take them on. But then they end up holding you back, kind of like a anchor, as you're trying to get everything over. So again, through this promise ring phase, you really, really want to dig into the business, because again, this isn't something that you set up. It's something you're buying. Now, of course, I'm a huge fan of buying them because it's cash flowing business, but you got to know what you're buying. I cannot stress that enough. So let's say you have made it through the promise ring phase. You're like, yes, I am happy with all the answers you gave me. We've had all these dinners, everything's great. So I am going to propose to you. It is now time for the engagement phase, which is your letter of intent, or what we say LOI, so letter of intent. At that point, then you are going to be writing an offer of intent, purchase price, which you've been able to determine based on all the numbers and everything, and the basic structure of the deal. So it's going to include the closing date and all the payment, all that kind of good stuff. So that is your engagement phase. At that point, you're going to be moving on to structuring the deal. With structuring the deal, a lot of this is predetermined, but this is where you move into that contract phase of making sure you structure it based on all the conversations you've had. You're now putting that into a document and making sure both parties agree, because this is what you're going to be signing. Seller agreed, yes, I am going to help transition for 6 months. Yes, I agreed to a 6-month clawback. It's spelled out in the deal what that transition looks like. Does that look like Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, they're coming into the office every day? Does it look like they're just on call? Does it look like they have 24 business hours to respond to you? Who is going to be doing certain paperwork for closing out that particular business year? If you're buying something mid-year, like there's a lot of like moving pieces that you have to make sure it is all structured and in writing and that every party agrees on it. It's not just about the price. The price is important, but all of the pieces that make it, yours is almost more important than that. So the clawback period is a really important part if you are the buyer. So now if a seller doesn't want a clawback, so a clawback, and I'll just back up a little bit on that, is a time frame where, let's say you close on a transaction May 1st. If I have a clawback period, let's say 6 months, and between May, fast forward to 6 months, any doors leave, the seller doesn't get paid on those doors. Again, it depends on how you structure that deal and the verbiage you use in that contract. So there could be a variety of clawbacks. There could be a variety of periods. There could be 6 months, 12 months, however many months. There could be 0 months. But I will say that as a buyer, if the seller is unwilling to do a clawback, that is a red flag and would make a big difference in what I'm willing to pay for that book of business. Because there are horror stories. In fact, I just spoke with a friend yesterday and he said his very first deal, he didn't know what he didn't know, and he didn't put a clawback period in when he was structuring the deal, and he closed, and literally the same day, their biggest client that had 40 doors said, I'm out. I don't know you. I don't want you to manage my properties. So bye. So he bought 40 doors that he had to pay for that he didn't actually even get to manage. He didn't even get that income. Those are really important pieces to remember when you're structuring that deal. You kind of got to go through all of that during the promise ring phase, because once you get to the LOI, that's basically the offer, right? So then you're putting together your contract. All right, let's recap. We had our first conversation. We had our dates. We liked each other. We're like, yes, let's move on to promise ring. Due diligence. We're still liking each other. Things are going good. So then the buyer proposes and says, yes, here's your LOI. You get through all the contract. Then comes closing day. Honestly, anticlimactic because pretty much 99% of the work is done in the 3 other buckets. Closing day is pretty much just that, closing day. Everything is signed, funds are transferred, attorneys are paid, CPAs are paid, everybody's paid. Now you're the owner of more doors and it's super exciting. Congratulations, now you're married and this is what you own. So let's move on to some other questions. I like to go through some of the little bit deeper things that we'll talk about. So this is kind of more in the due diligence phase, but the real questions to ask before you hire your dream team. I didn't really hit on the dream team yet, but your dream team is usually your guide. So that is me. I am a consultant coach in how to buy property management companies. I help people from start to finish. I have coaching programs to where I can say, hey, this is how you do it, and consult. You also want to make sure that you have a CPA on your team, and you want to make sure you have an attorney on your team. Make sure that you have the right people. There are attorneys in our industry that work on a national level that can help you, because it's really just contract law. This isn't landlord-tenant law. And then make sure you have a really trusted CPA. You should surround yourself with your dream team so that you can make sure that you are doing the right things. Before you hire them, this is again, when you're doing your due diligence, you really want to dig into these questions. So I wanted to highlight these particular questions. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. Happy to answer them toward the end. Number one, you really want to look at owner dependency. Is the owner still managing, and what's their actual salary? I talk a lot about boomer businesses and how I think they're a really good deal. But of course, there's pros and cons to all. I use the word boomer business very affectionately. That's the business that I bought in 2020 in my local market. I love them because they generally have a lot of doors. They generally have a lot of opportunity for you as the buyer to increase revenue, but they also have long-term clients or solid reputation in the market. And a lot of times the tenants have been there a long time too. But with the boomer businesses, I find that generally speaking, it's still a very owner dependent business. So the owner, of course, wants to go. Do you have enough team members to assimilate that into your business? Are they still 100% pen and paper while you're 100% virtual? What is that workload going to look like? You can take out the owner salary. So maybe they're just drawing 75,000 a year salary, but would they be more expensive to replace with the doors you're buying? Would they be less expensive? How are you running your business? Are you running heavy on prop tech and AI? So maybe it would be less expensive, but it's really important to know how dependent is the owner on the company. And then again, with those long-term clients, are the long-term clients going to be okay if that owner leaves? Because they could very well be like their buddy, right? Maybe they go golfing. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, I just call them on a Sunday because we chit chat and we're like buddies, but you don't run your business that way. So how are you going to manage that? There's no right or wrong, but it's really important to go into this eyes wide open. Cash flow clarity, of course. If you're pulling all the right reports and taking a look at all the numbers, I recommend take a look at the numbers before then you pay a CPA to dive deep, because you're going to be able to see the basics, but take a look at that and then see where you have opportunity to increase revenue. If you're buying like an A+ company, you're going to pay A+ dollars for that. And that's okay too. That's not necessarily a bad thing. But with the boomer businesses, you may have way more opportunity to increase revenue, but you're also going to have more work too. So like, what does that workload look like and who's doing that work? What's that going to cost you? You're going to be paying money. It just depends on, like, do you want to pay it on the front end or the back end? And what does that look like? Hidden expenses. So what are they paying for that you wouldn't? If you own a property management company, you're going to probably have a lot of the prop tech already, right? So you're going to have your property management software. You might have your showing software. You may have a process software. You already may have some of this. Anything that they're using, most likely you're not going to have to use. But let's say they just entered into an office lease and they want you to take it over. And that's $2,000 a month that you haven't been paying because you don't have an office, or maybe you already have an office. There's a lot of different things that you need to dig in deep and ask those questions. What is going on? Where's this? How much does this cost? All that good stuff. And then client concentration. Remember that story of my friend where he closed on the PMC and day one and day two, that large client left and he had no clawback? You don't want that to happen to you. So you really want to look at the client concentration. Now, I've been in the business a long time and everybody always wants those big clients. Everyone's like, how do you get the big clients? How do you get the builders? How do you get that? And that's fine. You can have those clients. But I'll tell you, if I'm buying a company and they have, two different clients that have 80 doors and I'm buying 200, so 200 doors and 80 are owned by only two people, that's a big red flag. Doesn't mean that I won't buy it, but I'm going to look at that and be like, well, I'm not going to necessarily offer you as much, because if one of those clients left, I mean, that's a big chunk of change, right? As well as that is, you really want to dig in deep too and look at the client list. So if you're looking at what the client list is, and let's say there's a bunch of LLCs, who's the owner of the LLC? So like, let's say maybe again, I own 40 doors, but they're under, 5 different LLCs. If I didn't do my due diligence and left, that's 40 doors, even though it looks like it wasn't the same owner. Take a look at client concentration. It doesn't mean you can't move forward, just need to know everything and what's going on. And then team structure. Team structure is really important. You really need to look at, number one, how is your business running? And how do you want to keep running your business? Do you want to take on any of the team members they have? What does that look like? What are those team members doing? Do they have documented processes? Can they operate without the owner? So remember, if this is like, boomer business and they don't have documented processes, they're not using like an app lead to run their company, do they call that owner every time they run into an issue? Are they empowered to make decisions? What's their maintenance threshold? How do they approve applications? All the little things, all that adds up for sure if you're not thinking about it ahead of time. This is if you're bringing on the team members. Sometimes a team member can be a little bit cranky about the sale. So maybe the seller was like, oh, yeah, this is my number two, and they're amazing. But their number two person, they wanted to buy the company, but they didn't get to. And now they're in your company creating havoc. So there's a lot to think about when you're looking at their team and negotiating that. And then contract lock in. So, what's locked in, what can walk. Just look at all the contracts. You want to make sure that you are looking at every single contract. Now, of course, is it feasible to go through 200 property management agreements and 200 leases? Probably technically no. There is AI now. You can feed it some info, but I don't know if it's perfect yet. But make sure you're asking about contracts for everything. Leases on buildings, contracts for phone systems, contracts for alarm systems, anything and everything you use to run a business. What about contracts for property management software? The seller may assume that you're going to assume that contract when in fact you're not. One other piece that we didn't hit on yet is insurance. It's really important that your insurance advisor is part of your dream team as well. So you want to make sure that you are letting your insurance advisor know that you're buying, because that could affect your E&O rates if you add a bunch of doors. And then also you want to have the conversation with the seller about tail insurance, and are they going to be paying for their own tail insurance? What does that look like? And so you really want to have all these conversations ahead of time before you move on to the actual closing part. So we have covered a lot in just 30 minutes as far as like the very high level, like 90-day from conversation, like first date to basically closing, marriage. That's a pretty quick marriage, really, 90 days, but could be done. I would love to talk about something I'm doing. I'm super excited about. I would love to invite you to come learn even more in person in Las Vegas with me. So January 16th, 2026 at the Suncoast Hotel, I will be sharing a in-person day. It is from 10 to 5, and then with a private dinner at 6 p.m. We're going to go deeper into this and talk about the 90-day roadmap. As you can see, even in just 30 minutes, there was so much information that I was highlighting. And my in-person event, it's going to go deeper. You're going to actually walk away with the whole notebook full of everything from how do you find property management companies? How do you make your list? How do you set up your CRM? What are some scripts that you can use? Like, what do you say when you call somebody? Like, how do you start the conversation so it's not awkward, right? Like, no weird pickup lines that you would use at a bar. So, all that kind of good stuff. And then really talking about transforming your mindset. So this is one slide I wanted to go through as well. I'm just really excited to share with everybody, like in person, walking in with an operator mindset. How do I add more doors? We've all been taught, add them door to door, hustle hard. You're on that hamster wheel. You're doing constant lead generation, and then you become limited by time and your bandwidth. In fact, I've had conversations recently with other business owners where they're like, yeah, I had a growth goal last year, but I got pulled back into the business in the middle of the year, and I didn't meet my growth goal because I spent like 5 months putting out fires and doing this and that. So what I'm going to be working on in Vegas is transforming that mindset, going from an operator to acquire mindset, and like, how do I buy growth? So it's the same thing, but on a much larger scale, right? Using less time and less bandwidth to grow quicker. Instead of thinking like, how do I add more doors? It's how do I buy growth, portfolio acquisition, and really transforming yourself and your business. It's a huge thing when you go from that operator mindset to acquire mindset. When you feel that inside and you're out in your community and you're like, hey, you start having those conversations with people. You're like, hey, I'm looking to buy a property management company. This is what I'm looking for. Who do you know? Because people know things, right? They have friends, they're going to talk. So when you're operator mindset, you're going to meetings, maybe with realtors, and you're like, hey, you have a client, they can't sell their home. I can manage that for them. And then you're spending the same amount of time and energy, but for one door versus 100. So that's what I'm going to be teaching in Vegas. And I'm super excited about it. I do have the QR code and I'll drop the link in here as well. I do have a bonus today. When you buy today from my boot camp, we will do a 30-minute prep call before Vegas. So it'll be just one 30-minute prep call, and we're going to talk about you and what you want to learn in Vegas and where you want to focus in your market and your specific goals, so that when you show up in person, we can really focus on your specific thing. It's going to be a very intimate event. I only have 6 spots left, so there's only 6 left. If you buy today, then I'm offering the 30-minute prep call. I'd love to answer questions about Vegas. I would love to ask 3 specific questions. And if you'll put into the chat how you feel. Number 1, will this decision get me closer to my goals? So if you go to Vegas, will it get you closer to your goals? If your growth goals are, let's say, 200 doors in 26, and you keep operating at an operator level where you're hustling for 1 door, maybe 10 one month, 5 another, or you could learn from somebody who's done this 50 times over in person in 1 day, where you could say, I can teach you in 1 day how to do it. And you could go buy 200 doors at one time. Is that going to get you closer to your goal? Number 2, does this increase my chance of success versus doing it alone? I know personally, whenever I have joined something and I've gone to an event, I've gone to a conference, or I've joined a coaching program in person, I call it my cheat code. So it's my cheat code to skip ahead. Sure, I could keep grinding door by door, or I could spend 1 day, make the investment in myself, and get my 200 doors in one fell swoop. And then number 3, can I figure out how to make the investment work? Now, this is really important because I'm not in the business to sell things to people who aren't ready. If you aren't ready for the investment of $24.97 and coming to Vegas 1 day, that's okay. Know that that ability is out there and there will be other opportunities down the road. But that $24.97, what if you could turn that into $200,000 of revenue in 1 year? That is an amazing investment and a great ROI. And again, I'm also not in the business to sell things to people who don't feel ready. So if you don't feel ready to walk through the door and transform your mindset from operator to acquirer, that's also okay. Keep following me, keep joining my free boot camps, but otherwise I recommend, come check it out. The ROI on that, just a 100-door acquisition, if you just played with the math, even $150K annual revenue at 25% margin, which is on the lower side, that could net you $37,000 just profit. So the ROI on that would definitely pay for itself. If the overall investment is a challenge, I can offer a payment plan. I can't get away or I'm too busy. It's only 1 day. Vegas has a lot of flights, so you could fly in that day and fly out that night. You could get away for 1 day, or you could make it a fun weekend. You could use it as a goal setting weekend. We are going to be in a hotel off strip, so you're not going to be in the middle of all the chaos. You could come for the weekend, go through my class on that Friday, and then maybe spend Saturday, Sunday doing some goal setting with yourself and working on your strategies, everything you've learned, and then go home and be ready to go on Monday. What if I can't find a deal? So I do get this question. Basically, what I'm teaching is how to think like an acquirer, evaluate opportunities, and structure the deals. You will walk away with a ton of information and be able to go do it. As far as finding a deal, I've always found that when I tell people I do something, then it starts to come. I did this years ago as an example. When I wanted to start speaking in front of rooms, like in property management classes, I just started telling people I was a speaker. I had never officially done speaking. I had never made a slide deck. I remember that I got a phone call from a Washington State NARPM chapter, and they're like, hey, I heard you're a speaker. Will you come speak to us about how you run your company virtual? I was like, yes, of course. And I got off the phone and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get my stuff together. The more that you really shift that mindset and you start talking out loud, like, I am an acquirer, I buy businesses, then you will find a deal and be set up to do that. I don't have capital for a deal. So we'll be talking about this in Vegas as well. I will tell you that I'm going to be using my particular purchase that I did in 2020 as a case study. I bought it for virtually no money down. I didn't actually have a lot of money, but I knew I was buying money. So I knew I could do it. I used seller financing and I just put a tiny bit down and I was able to do it. Now, there's many different ways, many different financing, but we'll go more in depth when we do this in-person event. There's lots of different ways you can structure your deals. I would love to see you. I love doing in-person events. Of course, I love working on the internet as well, but in-person is always special. And it's going to be at the Suncoast Hotel and Casino. It's off strip, inexpensive hotel rooms, January 16th. It's a Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. and then dinner at 6. Everything is included. So all you have to do is show up, have your positive mindset, and you're going to get everything. I'm going to have notebooks. You're going to have lunch. You're going to have snacks, beverages, all the things, and then dinner's included as well. So I would love to answer questions and see what kind of questions popped up. If there's any questions that you have about what we talked about today or Las Vegas in general, please pop them into the chat. Any questions about acquisitions? Let's see. Do the Vegas meeting people need to have some background in purchasing a PM business already? No, definitely not, Amy. The whole point of this is just so that I'm kind of starting from ground zero as far as everybody walking through the door. Now, certainly if you have a little bit of experience, that's fine too. But if you don't have any experience, then this is the place to learn. And like I said, you're going to walk away with everything. How do I learn more about seller financing? Definitely, I will be talking about that at my one-day event for sure, because it's a great way to purchase a property management company. A lot of boomers prefer seller financing so they're not hit with taxes when they sell. The long story short of it is I will be going through my particular purchase that I did during COVID as my case study. So I'll be diving deep into the seller financing, but there's pretty much any way you want, you can structure it. Again, it goes back to those conversations during the whole promise ring, engagement ring phase. Need to learn seller financing or loans information. In Vegas, I will be going through all of that. Part of working with me is I have a large network of people I refer out who I know can help you. You can do seller financing, you can do SBA loans, you could do a combo of them. There's tons of different ways that you can structure that financing piece. That really depends on that conversation up front as well. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in there. I'm happy to answer them. I could talk about buying businesses all day long. It's something I'm passionate about. As a reminder, if you buy during my bootcamp day, you do get that extra 30-minute prep call with me ahead of time so we can make sure you're set up and I'm bringing the information that you really want. Kelly or Liz, if you came, we could talk about that specifically on our call, and I could make sure that I have extra information for you just on that. I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their day, especially in the middle of December. I hope everybody is having a lovely holiday season. I hope all the property management maintenance emergencies are on the down low and not too bad. And I want to thank everybody for coming today. And I really appreciate you spending time with me. And I love serving our community. And again, thank you so much. I will see you all soon. And I hope to see you in Las Vegas. Have a great day.